Hi guys, so I had a little bit of spare time and it occurred to me that I haven't done a reading wrap up in a little while. You don't know what I read in the second half of October or throughout the entirety of November, so I'm taking this opportunity to do a October-November wrap-up all in one. I've read 6 books in total since I did my last wrap-up, so without further ado, let's have a chat about the books, shall we? So the first book I finished was actually more of a short story, and it is a double-barreled detective story by Mark Twain. Mark Twain was an American novelist writing in the late 1800s and early 1900s, around the same time as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And this story is in fact a Sherlock Holmes story. It is a bit of a parody of the author's characters that he created, although Watson's not in this one, only Sherlock Holmes is. And it's a book I enjoyed for the relationship between the originals and his version, for the little, you know, asides and comments. As a Sherlock Holmes fan, I really appreciated that. But I wouldn't say it was out of this world. It's only a book I would say read if you're a hardcore Mark Twain fan or a big Sherlock Holmes fan. I think it's really only going to have an appeal to you if you're one of those two people, because I don't think it necessarily stands alone as an amazing piece of literature, but it will probably make you laugh if you are a Sherlock Holmes fan. It may also annoy you slightly if you're a Sherlock Holmes fan, but if you can take it for what it is, as a parody, as a little bit of satire, then it's definitely worth giving a read if you, like me, are really into Sherlock Holmes. My dad actually read this one and discovered it first and told me about it and said, yeah, Mark Twain wrote a Sherlock Holmes story, so I'm glad I finally got around to reading it. I then read 2 thrillers, both of which I gave 2 stars. I think I am coming down off my thriller bender. They were really good at the time, they were really immersive and distracting, but I think I've started to grow a little bit sick of the tropiness, and if I do read more thrillers I want to find some more unique, creative thrillers, so I'd love some recommendations. But the next 2 I read were firstly Playing Dead by Julia Heberlin. Now I read another thriller by this author called Black Eyed Susans a couple of months ago and really enjoyed that one. Brilliant pacing, had me on tenterhooks wanting to know what was happening, constantly turning the pages, quite a creative mystery and narrative structure, so I really enjoyed that. This one, however, is an earlier novel that she wrote before that, and you can see a lot of the elements in it that led up to Black Eyed Susans. There's some very similar, you know, characterization. Let's just say if I didn't know the same author wrote them, I probably would have been able to guess. But unfortunately this one was nowhere near as good, which is the general consensus that I seem to be getting from Goodreads anyway, so I don't think I'm apart from that. It's just not as good as Black Eyed Susans. It's about a young woman in America who receives a letter from a woman she's never heard of saying that she is her missing daughter that was stolen from her when she was a baby. And basically it's about the unfurling of that mystery. It doesn't necessarily go in the direction you're expecting it to from that premise, and I'm not really sure I found the mystery that compelling as the story unfolded. I also didn't really like a lot of the things the author did and said, so I found this a lot in thrillers, and I found it in the next one I read as well, is an obsession with the female characters' looks and their weight. At one point in this book, the narrator, the main character, tells us how beautiful her mother was, and as evidence of this beauty tells us how much she weighs, and it's a very small weight, which is fine, probably healthy for some women, but is also, I very much doubt, an average weight, and I found that like really kind of off-putting. And then later on there was another character who was just a minor character but was portrayed to be quite an annoying woman that the narrator didn't like, and we got to hear her dress size, which was of course bigger than her mother, and I just find that so disturbing, that sort of characterization through weight. I was not up for that, so yeah, I think the author has definitely improved over time. I wouldn't necessarily recommend checking this one out, but I would still recommend Black Eyed Susans. The next one I read was Final Girls by Riley Sager. In some ways I like this one better. I certainly liked the ending to this one better because I didn't see it coming. I was sure I knew what was going to happen at the end, and I was right on like some things, but the big thing I didn't guess, and that's the best bit about a thriller really, isn't it? When the ending takes you by surprise. So I really enjoyed that one. It definitely had its twists and turns that kept me going, but throughout most of the narrative I just felt incredibly frustrated. I didn't understand why the relationships that were forming in the way they did, or why the main character was going along with them. I found it really hard to get into her shoes, and I think that is the job of the author, to make it feel like you get it, and most of the time I just felt frustrated and like, why is everyone just going along and behaving the way they are? I think the ending kind of explained some of the behaviour, which was helpful, but didn't take away from my overall feeling of frustration throughout the book. The premise of this one is that the main character is a final girl. She's been dubbed thus by the press after she survived a mass murder, and she is one of 3 women who have all survived mass murders over the years and have become the focus of lots of media attention. Now one of the other final girls has died, supposedly by suicide, but some people are a little bit more curious about what happened to her, and then the second final girl turns up on our final girl's doorstep, and it's about them getting to know one another and what's really going on, you know, thriller stuff. I also can't remember exactly what the comment was, but there was something at the beginning of this one as well that was very much in the lines of weight and body shape and size that was used to characterise people that bothered me. I had a conversation about this on Twitter, and I think a few people agree with me about this obsession with how much female characters in thrillers weigh and what their body shape is, so I don't think I'm alone in that, and it just puts me off. I don't get it. I just get taken out of the story and feel a little bit annoyed. And yeah, I read this one because there was so much hype surrounding it. I get why people really like it. Again, I said the ending surprised me. I thought it was quite a clever premise. I hadn't read a thriller like that before, but I didn't love it. What can I say? Moving on to a book I did love. Well, that would of course have to be What is Economics by Rosa Luxemburg. I talked about this one in my last currently reading video. It is a book from the early 1900s written by Rosa Luxemburg, who was a political activist. She was eventually killed by a far-right group in Germany just after World War I, but before then she managed to write quite a large array of works and, you know, made her stamp on the world, and I have fallen in love with her. I think she's amazing. I knew a little bit about her before, but I'd never read anything she'd written, and this book was just perfection. Now the copy I read is out of print. I think you can only read it in bind-ups. It was my mum's copy, so I will try to find a bind-up of Rosa Luxemburg's work that includes this specific piece if you're interested in checking her out. But it was essentially what the title suggests. What is economics? She was exploring what is the science of economics, what are we studying when we study economics, and she was looking at other scholars and professors' definitions of economics and economic life and what they said, and kind of tearing them apart. She threw so much academic shade. She highlighted how convoluted their explanations were, how inaccessible they were to most people, how very little they actually clarified, and she was just brilliant. She was so good. She was so witty and sassy throughout this work. It was only about 100 pages, but I feel like I now want to model all of my academic writing on her. She was brilliant, and it was just a bit of a mixture of politics and economics, but it was also a bit of a look into history, because she talks a lot about trade relationships during the late 18 and early 1900s, which I found really interesting. So it was like reading about history and reading about politics, and a lot of the stuff she was saying was still very relevant to today. Obviously the actual factual stuff based in Germany trades this much with the UK in this field, that kind of thing, isn't as relevant, but her general points were, and I really appreciated reading this finally. I definitely want to read more of the stuff that she wrote. Another vaguely political book that I read, well, it was pretty political, but it was comedic at the same time, was Jonathan Pye's book Off the Record. Jonathan Pye is a comedic character created by somebody else, and you can watch his comedy on YouTube. I will link his channel down below. I think he's hilarious. I love his comedy sketches. He plays a television journalist, Jonathan Pye, and all of his videos are sort of between takes where he just goes off and rants about what he thinks, and he can't really say to the camera on the actual actual live air, and I think he's really funny. I think the book is funny, but I'm not sure it translated as well into written copy as it does on screen. You know, some things just are meant for different types of media. I don't know how to explain it, and I don't want to discourage you from checking out Jonathan Pye, because I still think he's brilliant and hilarious, and I think lots of the stuff in the book was really great and on point. I just was expecting more. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I was. The book essentially takes various different figures from various different walks of life. We've got people like Tony Blair, Margaret Thatcher, Simon Cowell, and he tears them apart. And it's a really funny premise, and I did appreciate some of it. Yeah, I just can't say I fell in love with the book. I definitely prefer him on YouTube. Insubstantial, perhaps. I think the book felt a little bit insubstantial. But finally, my 6th book was actually a reread, and I actually listened to this on audiobook. It was The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, which is the first collection of Sherlock Holmes short stories written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And it was, you know, I don't know how many times I've read this before, but it was my first time listening to the Stephen Fry narration of these stories. So I listened to Stephen Fry narrate the first 2 novels that come before this collection of short stories, and I finally got on to The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes and listened to them all with his narration, and he's brilliant. I think he does a spectacular job of narrating the Sherlock Holmes series. I think if you're trying to get into Sherlock Holmes, or you're already a massive fan, I would definitely recommend downloading his narrations. You get almost the entire collection for £1 credit on Audible, so that's £7.99, which I think is a pretty good deal. And I'm in love. I'm going to listen to these all the time, much like my Stephen Fry Harry Potters. He just does a fantastic job. And one of the things I will say though, if you are a person who's listened to Harry Potter narrated by Sherlock Holmes, there will be moments where, say, a new character is about to be introduced and they speak and you think, oh, it's Hagrid. It's not Hagrid, but you do recognise the voices slightly, but he does a great job. And I love Sherlock Holmes. If you've watched more than 5 videos from me, you will know how much I love Sherlock Holmes. So I was just basically reliving something I already adored, and I'm now listening to the next collection of short stories. But I don't know what else to say about that. I just think if you haven't checked out Sherlock Holmes, you should. And if you like Sherlock Holmes but haven't listened to Stephen Fry read them, then you should also check that out. Just love them. One of my favourite books of all time. But those were all the books I've read recently. I hope you enjoyed listening to me chat about them. I'd love to discuss anything I mentioned in this video down in the comments with you, so please do leave a comment and we can chat about all of these books or the issues I've talked about. I just love engaging in conversations about literature with you, and I look forward to hearing from you. But until next time guys, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye!